You're very confident, aren't you?
Yes, because I know Stephen couldn't love a girl like you. Well, if he couldn't, he's an awfully good actor.
She was very, very nice to the crew, always generous to everybody. Every now and then she would come across somebody that she didn't like, and her anger and her wrath, just as extravagant as she could be in her praise, she could also be in her criticism if she didn't like something.
She was a perfectionist. And I don't think she was ever pleased with anything she ever did. When she did a woman's face, one whole side of her face was disfigured.
Did she?
Yes, and now just hold still. There we are. Is that better?
She felt that if it was a good part, that was the important thing. The picture was the important thing.
You couldn't marry me.
Have I asked you to marry me?
Well, no. And you mustn't.
Why not?
Because I want to get married. I've always wanted to get married. I want to have a home and children. I want to go to market and cheat the grocer and fight with the landlord. I want to belong to the human race. I want to belong.
She'd had 2 miscarriages with Douglas, and she had 1 with Francho. So as a result, she decided to adopt. Christina, she adopted her first. And then she decided she wanted a little boy. So she adopted Christopher. And that was wonderful for a long, long time.
In questo campo fu una vera pioniera. A quel tempo non era sposata e per una single o divorziata adottare un bambino era molto difficile, se non addirittura impossibile.
When we would go on locations, they would stand and cry and carry on, "Mommy, please don't leave us, don't leave us. We don't want you to go." And she would try to explain to them that she had to go. This was her job, and she had to go. And they would still beg and cry and carry on.
Joan Crawford came to the end of her MGM days in a very traumatic way. She had done 2 or 3 real bad flops. In those years, stars' lives as real top stars didn't last very long, particularly the women. The women have a very short shelf life. People wanted to see young actresses and bright youth on the screen. And so Crawford was cast adrift. On her last day at the studio, she said goodbye to a few old friends and drove out the auto gate. And nothing was said, no speeches, no gold watch, no flowers even.
Well, I was in good company with Katharine Hepburn and Fred Astaire and a few others. I thought, well, I'm through.
And then Jerry Wald, who was at Warner Brothers, a very active and ambitious producer, persuaded Warner to sign Crawford. And they signed her to a long-term contract, I think for half of what her salary had been at Metro. And they submitted various scripts to her, which she turned down. She told me a story once about when she got a call from a producer to come into the studio. And she was very hopeful that they were going to offer her a new script and a good script. She got all dressed up, bought a new hat. She was hoping that he would compliment her on how she looked. And she said that he turned to her and he said, "Now, I think this last script that we sent you is a good script and you should do it, because nobody wants you. And if you want to work, you ought to do this picture." And she told me she went home and she cried for hours afterward. But she made up her mind she wasn't going to do any script that they sent her unless they sent her something good. Then finally, the script came for Mildred Pierce.
Well, I think God had his hand on my shoulder because Mr. Mike Curtiz hated me. He wanted Barbara Stanwyck. He wanted no part of me. He said, I don't want those big, broad shoulders. I asked if I could please test. I did the test with Ann Blythe. At the end of the scene, I waited for cut, cut, cut. Nothing, no response from the director. And I looked at him. He was streaming with tears down his face. And he said, I love you, baby. I got the part.
Mildred, a name gasped in the night.
You make me feel, I don't know, warm.
And wanted.
The result was a very successful picture in which she won the Academy Award, something that she had been hoping for a long time.
You've been snooping around ever since I got this job, trying to find out what it is. And now you know. You know, don't you?
Know what? Know what, Mother?
You knew when you gave that uniform to Lottie that it was mine, didn't you?
Your uniform?
Yes, I'm waiting tables in a downtown restaurant.
My mother, a waitress.
I took the only job I could get so you and your sister could eat and have a place to sleep and some clothes on your backs.
Aren't the pies bad enough? Did you have to degrade us?
Vita, don't talk like that.
I'm really not surprised. You've never spoken of your people, who you came from, so perhaps it's natural. Maybe that's why Father...
Sorry I did that. I'd have rather cut off my hand. I'd never have taken the job if I hadn't wanted to keep us all together.
I don't think the public knows what that Oscar means to us. It is one of the most emotional things that can ever happen to a human being.
They changed her contract at Warner's. After the rewrite of the contract, she told me she was getting $250,000 a picture, which was an enormous amount of money back in the 40s.
She wanted anything that was a good picture. Jerry Wall didn't want her to do humoresque because he said, Joan, you're only in the last part of the picture. She said, I don't care. If it's a good picture, she says, and I can play, and I'll play Wally Berry's grandmother.
You don't expect me to believe that, do you?
I don't care what you believe.
I'd like to slap your face.
Why don't you try it?
Most audiences have the wrong impression of Crawford. She always portrayed a very strong, willful woman. She was not that in real life. That was performance, that was acting. She was anything but.
Questa era forse la più grande contraddizione della sua personalità. Era determinata e ambiziosa, quasi in maniera maniacale, ma era anche molto vulnerabile. Voleva essere amata.
After the breakup of the marriage with Tone, she felt that a home needed a father and the children needed a father. And she met Philip Terry, who was under contract to MGM, and she felt very comfortable with him. But years later, after she divorced him, she said she made a mistake, and she thought being comfortable was love, but it wasn't.
We were in Sedona, Arizona, and we were working out in 120-degree heat. By that time, she had adopted twins, too, so she had 4 children to talk with. She would listen to all the problems, and finally she'd say, now, you keep a happy face, and you know that Mommy loves you, and I'll call you tomorrow night. Now, put your sister on. This went on for all 4 of these children, and then she just collapsed afterwards. And I said to her 2 or 3 nights later, I said, Joan, how can you do this every night? She said, well, they're children. If I didn't, they wouldn't understand. She loved those children, and I think she was a devoted mother.
Non credo che nessuno capisse veramente il rapporto che Joan aveva con i suoi figli, il perché li avesse adottati. Secondo me pensava che senza figli non si sarebbe sentita realizzata come donna.
Joan was a real taskmaster, primarily with herself, and it did reflect onto other people. She was a rigid mother, very rigid, and she was rigid with the children.
She was a disciplinarian. She wanted us to grow up independently, self-reliant, and to set our goals to what we believe was right.
She was determined not to let her kids fall into that kind of princess, prince Hollywood syndrome that sadly a lot of famous actors' children had fallen into.
She felt that these children might not have the money to live the kind of life that she lived. And she wanted them to be able to go out and face the world.
We had one cook and we had our governess, but we still had to make our beds and wash our dishes. And I think we were told when we were about 4 or 5 years old we had to bring our chairs into the kitchen sink and start washing the dishes.
And of course the children resented that because they felt that the servants were there to do that. And she knew that was wrong. And all she was doing was just preparing them to go out into the world.
I saw her mostly when she was with the twins. And I also saw the way she talked about them. And she would talk about the twins with a different tone than she talked about Christine or Christopher. I do know she was frustrated with Christopher. Joan and I had driven down to visit her son, who was in a military boarding school. And I know he hadn't been writing home because he just didn't want to. So I told him I felt I didn't write to my mother enough, and I thought it'd be nice if he did. And I think he did once or twice.
I was assigned as a costumer on Flamingo Road. I was so thrilled about meeting her. I wondered how she would react to somebody that was a fan, really. I walked in and I said, I'm here to help you today. She said, welcome aboard. And which relaxed me immediately, and I felt I was so fortunate not only to find her still the glamorous star, but a very warm and wonderful person to work with.
I'd heard so many stories about her, and I didn't know exactly what to expect. I thought she'd be very demanding, overpowering, and overwhelming. And what I saw, which surprised me, was a woman who seemed very much down to earth, very simple, unpretentious, and very smart insofar as films were concerned. You could see the signs of age beginning to creep up. But of course, when she got made up, she looked wonderfully in it. She was very, very nice to the crew, always generous to everybody. One instance where she misbehaved. When we were doing a picture called Goodbye My Fancy, it was the last film I did with her, there was a young girl in it named Janice Rule. Because she was a beginner, I was trying to help her, and I spent maybe a little more time than normal talking with her and trying to make her comfortable and getting her into the role. And Joan, for no reason at all, became very jealous. I think, for one thing, Janice was very young and very pretty, and she was very rude to Janice. And years later, when Janice Rule became a very good actress, Crawford sent her a letter apologizing for the way she had treated her.
I have no place in your life, Myra, no proper place.
Without you, I have nothing.
When Joan was cast in Sudden Fear, it was a demanding role that she needed in her career. One of the actresses that she worked with was Gloria Grahame. And unlike most actresses, she liked Gloria Grahame and was great help to her. I worked with Gloria Grahame, and Gloria Grahame told me that a lot of her performance was guided by Crawford.
Try to stand on it. It's the best thing.
No, I don't think you should.
Exercise is good for it.
Is it?
Keeps the circulation going.
All right, Irene.
Joan Crawford was an actress of many different colors. Each role was a step towards something better. She became the character, which many people don't do. She was good with people. People were in awe of her, and she was never in awe of herself. She was willing to walk up to anybody, shake hands with them, talk with them. Who are you? What's your name?
She was always sending notes or telegrams every time on my birthday at Christmas time.
The fan letters.
Rispondeva di suo pugno alle lettere dei fan. Mandava migliaia di fotografie con il suo autografo.
Hand autographed.
She said to me, never go out. You must never go out dressed like sometimes you dress. You must always look your best for your fans. You never know who you're going to see.
What made her a star was I worked my buns off to get here and I'm not going to lose it. And so therefore, if it meant getting dressed up to go to the market, she'd do it. If it meant giving one more interview to somebody you can't stand, but it's going to help the picture, she would do it. She didn't complain. She was a total pro.
Hollywood, it's given me my education. It's given me everything I've ever earned. The power to adopt children, to raise them, to educate them. I will never be ungrateful for that.